Hi, I'm Marnie Schmidt, and I'm a real believer in operational excellence and quality. My mission is to help people like you build quality systems that achieve not only better quality, but a better customer experience so that you'll be a believer too. In this series, I am breaking down all the requirements in ISO 9001 line by line and interpreting and translating them into plain English so they're easier to understand. I've broken the modules into things that kind of make sense and are manageable, and also I would audit, if I were doing an internal audit, I would audit these sections in these size and how I've broken them down for each of these videos. In each video, I will give you one good reason to trust me. And because we're going to be talking about planning, I would just like to tell you I have done a lot of quality systems. I've implemented them as an employee as well as a consultant, and I've gotten a lot better at it over the years, and it's usually by learning of how things maybe didn't work so well. And so I translate that into a little bit of planning can make all the difference and really can help you avoid making mistakes where you have to go back and fix them. So that's my tip for the day. Do a little planning. And thankfully, the ISO 9001 standard gives us a whole bunch of stuff about the things that we need to plan. We're going to be talking a little bit about risk today. That's part of planning, and how to carry out plans. And so now that we've identified our processes and we've sort of decided what our quality system is going to look like, at least what the scope of it is and what processes we're going to carry out to achieve some objectives. Now it's going to take us through some steps of what planning for quality and what planning actually looks like. Again, this is still mostly in the hands of top management, so that's kind of exciting. This is about planning our business. So let's just jump right into it. 6.1, actions to address risks and opportunities. When planning for the quality management system, the organization shall consider the issues referred to in 4.1. What was 4.1? Okay, 4.1 was context of the organization. Remember, it said that we needed to make sure we understood the external and internal issues, and we talked about maybe just a simple little SWOT analysis might be appropriate. We just figure out what's going on, what are our context inside and outside. And the requirements referred to in 4.2. What was 4.2? That was interested parties and their needs. And then determine the risks and opportunities that need to be addressed in order to A, give assurance that the quality management system can achieve its intended results. B, it will enhance desirable effects, so that's the good side. We have to make sure that our plan includes ways to enhance our desirable effects. C, prevent or reduce undesirable effects. Okay, well, of course. And D, achieve improvement. So our plan needs to include all of those things, that we're going to achieve our intended results, that we're going to enhance the desirable, minimize the undesirable, and then improve. So those are the requirements. But this is the part where we're going to talk about risks and opportunities. So we talked about context, and we talked about interested parties, and we talked about maybe using a SWOT analysis, and maybe that's enough. There's other tools that you can use to further address risk. Risk management is a gigantic field, and there's a million different ways that you can manage risk, including just trying to figure out what your risks are. If you're in the automotive industry, there's a lot of, and all kinds of other industries, there's a little more involved tool that's called an FMEA, a failure modes and effects analysis. So this is more process-based. So you go into a process and you might take the steps, and remember, we've already identified our processes, but we can then put the steps in. I'll give you a link to get an actual template of how to do an FMEA, but it involves using a scale about risk that you'll try to put a number to a bunch of different things. So you break your process down and you list each of the steps, and then you ask yourself what could possibly go wrong, and then on a scale you assign a number. Okay, what's the risk that this is going to happen? Like, how often does it occur? And then you give yourself another assessment in a different way. If this happens, how bad is it? Because there might be something that's like hardly ever going to occur. It's very, very unlikely to occur. So that might get a very low number of, oh, there's hardly any risk at all. But then how severe is it? Like, if it happens though, what's the consequence? Oh, that's bad. That's a high number, very high risk. And then the other thing is, how likely am I to detect that that happened, that it went wrong? Will I be able to see this? And if that, like, oh God, if that went, I probably wouldn't know until it was too late. That would have a very high risk. And then you put all of that risk together so you can figure at each step which steps have the most risk, so you can identify and prioritize where do I put my activities and actions. So if you want to use an FMEA, I'll put the link there so that you can figure that out. Try that tool along. It's a great tool. It's time consuming, but it is something, if you really want to get into the nitty gritty and do more than just an easy SWOT analysis, you can get into your processes and use that to assess your risk. So moving on, again, we were talking about, when they talked about risk, the risk management, the quality people went crazy when they read this, the first version of this coming out. In the 2015 revision, everybody went bananas about this, and now really we can all just settle down a little bit and just think about risk. Just when you're looking at your processes, think about risk and then have a plan to address it. That's what this whole section is about, just making sure that you've got a plan. So 6.1.2, the requirement is the organization shall plan. So now understanding those risks. A, actions to address these risks and opportunities, so both the negative and the opportunities, the positive risks. And B, how to, 1, integrate and implement the actions into its quality management system processes. So how, once we know these things and how we're going to have actions, how do we integrate them into our processes? And 2, how do we evaluate the effectiveness of the actions? So taking an action, or just being busy about a problem or a risk and say, oh, I'm working on it. There needs to be some things that are a little more specific about what is the action that's necessary, and then how effective it is when I do take action once I've identified what I'm going to do. Actions taken to address risks and opportunities shall be proportionate to the potential impact on the conformity of products and services. So this is kind of letting you know if it's something that's really important, if a risk is likely to impact your ability to make good products or services, it says we got to give that first priority. And if there's something that we can do, that there's an opportunity that can make our products better, that needs to get a high priority as well. There's a couple of clarifying notes here that kind of help you. Again, it kind of walks you through, this is what you might think about if you're talking about risk. These are not requirements that you have to do each of these things. They're just clarifying notes to help you get in the mood of risk-based thinking. Note 1, options to address risks can include avoiding risk, taking risk in order to pursue an opportunity, eliminating the risk source, changing the likelihood or consequence, sharing the risk, or retaining risk by informed decision. So you can decide to just keep the risk, and it's because we know that it's not that big of a deal, or we have to take that risk right now and we'll maybe deal with it a little bit later. Note 2, opportunities can lead to the adoption of new practices, launching new products, opening new markets, addressing new customers, building partnerships, using new technology, and other desirable and viable possibilities to address the organization's or its customers' needs. All just clarification of what risk might be, what risks you might consider, and what things you might do with it. So that's risk. I don't want to spend too much time on it. You are going to have to, and why wouldn't you? If you're baking a management system for yourself and you're going to run your business, you are going to want to take a minute to think about risk, are you not? And you're going to want to take some actions to try to do the things that the standards suggest, that you can minimize it, you can accept it because you've taken the time to say it's worth accepting it, or you can do something to make sure if there's an opportunity out there that you're aware of it and you're doing something going forward to try to make sure you take advantage of that positive risk. So that's all about risk. We're going to move on to quality objectives. That's next. 6.2, quality objectives and planning to achieve them. The organization shall establish quality objectives at relevant functions, levels, and processes needed for the quality management system. So this says, how many quality objectives do we have to have? Well, we have to have some that are basically for the entire organization. We need to have some very high level ones, and then we can also have them at different functions. So we don't have to have an objective in every single area with every single department and every single activity and every single person. We don't necessarily have to do that. It says here where it's relevant at the right functions, levels, and processes. So it is a good idea, though, if you're going to be using a process approach, that it have an objective or an intended result that would be an objective, and that it be measurable and all that stuff. So here's the list of what quality objectives need to do. The quality objectives shall have these characteristics. They shall, A, be consistent with the quality policy. Well, of course, your quality objectives should support the quality policy. B, they should be must be measurable. So if there's an objective, we need to figure out, like if we want to say, oh, our objective is just to be the best. What does that mean? Is it measurable? So objectives shall be measurable. C, they shall take into account applicable requirements. So we should have objectives around requirements. We want to be right 100% of the time. We want to achieve 100% customer satisfaction, whatever. So we've got something measurable and relative to the applicable requirements. D, they must be relevant to conformity of products and services and to enhancement of customer satisfaction. Again, they got to be relevant to the requirements. They've got to be relevant to our products and services and making sure that our customers are satisfied. E, they need to be monitored. So we have to not only measure them, but monitor them. So we can't just give ourselves a target without actually measuring and monitoring it. They shall be communicated. So everybody in the organization needs to be aware of what the quality objectives are. Some organizations will have just a couple of really high-level objectives. The company wants to have 100% customer satisfaction, or they want to be 100% quality ratings with their customers, or they want to have 0 defects, or they want to have, I don't know, whatever your customers are into. If they're 100% on-time delivery, that would be a customer service. It's not really a quality objective, but it is a customer satisfaction objective, so it qualifies. But it has to be measurable. It's got to be reported. We got to know where we're at. It's got to be communicated. Everybody needs to be aware of it and whether or not they impact that objective. And it needs to be, the final thing is, updated as appropriate. So we have to keep those objectives live and living and with us and relevant, and sometimes we need to up the ante a little bit. Like if we start to achieve an objective, the idea would be to make sure that we update it and make sure that we continually improve it. And finally, they should be updated as appropriate. So as we identify our quality objectives, we need to make sure that we keep them live, we keep them relevant, and we update them as needed. Especially if we're achieving those objectives, we need to ratchet it up and make it and challenge ourselves and improve. The final requirement under that is the organization shall maintain documented information on the quality objectives. So yes, we have to write this down. We can't just talk about it. We can't just go, oh yeah, everybody knows we're trying to be the best. No, we have to have the objectives written down, that they're measured, that they're monitored, what current levels we're at, that they're communicated, and we need to update them at some regularity. So this is going to be another thing that is going to be documented. Moving on, 6.2.2. When planning how to achieve its quality objectives, the organization shall determine. So now that we've got the objectives, we know how we're going to measure them, now we have to figure out how we're going to achieve those. So this is another thing that we've got to have a plan. So not only what we want to get done and what our objectives are, but now we've got to come and make a plan. We have to determine, A, what will be done. So that's the first thing. So we've got an objective. We want to be 100% or 0 defects. Let's say 0 defects. We've got to have a plan. How are we going to achieve that? Well, we need to first identify what are we going to do to make sure that we don't have defects. What specific action item are we going to start with? B, what resources are going to be required? So it's not only that everybody is going to do their best and we're going to be the best and we're going to get 100%, whatever. It is what specifically are we going to do and what resources are necessary in order to do that thing. C, who's going to be responsible? D, when it will be completed. Anytime there's an action to be taken, I always recommend that you use who and by when. If you don't have who and by when, it's likely that that action item is just going to die on the vine, or it's just going to languish, and maybe it'll get done and maybe it won't get done. But you have to identify at the very least who's going to do it and by when, and follow that. And finally, how the results will be evaluated. So we can assign an action item, and I'm sure that you've had this experience as I have, where people said, oh yeah, that's done. But then you find out it's like kind of halfway done, or I did something and maybe we got the result or we didn't. What does done look like? And making sure that you define that, an action item, that the action item is complete, or if it's training, that yes, everybody was trained, but then we also made sure that it was an effective action item, and that was done. So there has to be a plan for achieving those objectives, not only just putting them out there that we want to do it, but then how we're going to do that. And then this also is kind of a small area, but it's so important, and they just like, that's weird that the ISO, the way it's written, the ISO standard just kind of slips change in, like, oh, there's a little change. We got to talk about change a little bit. So here is 6.3, planning of changes. When the organization determines the need for changes to the quality management system, the changes shall be carried out in a planned manner. So we have to, if we're going to make changes, we have to carry them out in a planned manner. Now, like I said, we just kind of slip change in there. We're like, oh, it's kind of like an afterthought, but it's really, really powerful, and these requirements, they just don't look that threatening to me about change, but change is one of the highest risk things that you can have in your management system. So having really, really good change control is really super important. So when we determine the need for change, the changes shall be carried out in a planned manner. So there has to be some methodology, there has to be some formality about it. The organization shall consider the following 4 things. A, the purpose of the change and the potential consequence. So we just can't willy-nilly like, oh, we're not going to do that anymore. Oh, we're going to do this a different way. We need to have, for any changes that are to the management system itself, we need to figure out what the purpose of the change is and the potential consequence. B, the integrity of the quality management system. We don't want the integrity of the management system to suffer at all. C, the availability of resources. So, oh yeah, from now on we're going to do this particular thing. Well, we have to make sure we've got the resources to do whatever that change is. And finally, D, the allocation or reallocation of responsibilities and authorities. Now remember, change came up a little bit earlier when we were talking about leadership, that we have to designate who is responsible for changes to processes. It might be one person, it might be whoever owns the process. Here we talk about change again. We have to make sure that we have a plan when we want to make a change to the management system, and then we have to make sure that we look at the purpose of the change and who's responsible, and is the quality system going to suffer at all, and what is the availability of resource. And if we're going to make a change, maybe we have to reallocate responsibility somewhere else. We're going to add activities or whatever it is. We're going to put someone within a department responsible for a particular change to the system. All of these things need to be put in a plan, and we need to have discipline about that. So making sure that when we do make changes, we've thought them through and we have a really good way of making sure that the change gets implemented correctly and it doesn't negatively impact our management system. So that is all of element 6. Next, we will be starting on element 7, which is a little bit longer. That one's kind of broken up into some different areas as well. So until next time, until we get to element 7, I hope you enjoyed element 6. And until next time, keep improving.